Today we're going to try Twisted Noodles, which are apparently a new brand of ramen noodles out on some store shelves now. I see they're in, they say Target, Walmart Canada, not Walmart US, H-E-B, which is where I found this if you're in Texas, and soon to be in the Dollar Tree with cup noodle versions, which seems like it's going to be a ripoff because the reason I wanted to grab this, first of all, it's very rare for a new ramen to enter the market besides like, you know, kind of niche overseas ramens. We pretty much had Top Ramen and Maruchan have been the go-to brands in America as far as I'm concerned my whole life. There really hasn't been any other competitor that has honestly taken up any shelf space besides Maruchan and Top Ramen, and then you get into the more niche brands. But nationwide brands, that was it until hopefully now, I guess. We'll see how it tastes, but according to them, now I had to look this up, they are a fairly new product. They're just now getting on shelves pretty much this year. At least it says they came to H-E-B around February, which was last month, which is where I found them. According to them, they have a nice little origin story here. Our story began in 2014 as a small company with a big dream. So they went to South Dakota. People may ask why ramen, but our question is why not? Ramen is versatile, convenient, and affordable, appealing to all age groups, budgets, and lifestyles. So they want to basically bring ramen noodles to America in made in the USA way. That's their thing. I looked, it's Albany Farms. That's what I looked up. This is their Twisted Noodles brand, but the company's Albany Farms. And they want ramen noodles made in the US instead of Top Ramen and Maruchan. As they say here, Albany Farms is committed to bringing America's favorite meal, ramen noodles, which sadly is probably correct because everybody who's poor and broke eats ramen noodles like me, which is a lot of people. We proudly label our ramen noodles as made in the USA. This means the wheat grown by our own very hardworking farmers is transformed into steamy bowls of delicious noodles to satisfy ramen lovers nationwide. So that's them committing to the noodles being made in America. I assume the seasoning is too, because that's their whole shtick. That's their whole spiel. But they're a fairly new company, and they have chicken, beef, and shrimp flavors in bag form like this, and in cup noodle form. As I said, Walmart Canada, Target, H-E-B, and Dollar Tree. The interesting thing about this, though, is that it's actually cheaper than Maruchan and Top Ramen at my local H-E-B. The Maruchan was actually 34 cents per packet, while this was 30 cents, which is obviously, you know, not a big deal when you're talking about 4 pennies, but it can be a difference in a budget. And if these taste as good or better, then, you know, there's no reason not to go that way. So that's kind of why I wanted to try them out for everybody on a budget, or if you like to keep Top Ramen as a backup and stuff like that. We might have a new competitor in the market who is actually cheaper. For now, I'm assuming that their plan is to hopefully infiltrate the market and become, you know, kind of a staple go-to ramen flavor, and then they'll probably raise their prices to match Maruchan and Top Ramen. That's just a guess. That's speculation from me. I think the reason they're cheaper now is kind of a loss leader kind of thing to get in, and then they'll probably raise their prices. But for now, let's enjoy the fruits of capitalism, I guess, with some Twisted Noodles beef-flavored ramen. So we got the instructions over here. Obviously, we probably don't need them, but I'll read them anyway. Boil 2 cups of water in a saucepan, add noodles and contents of seasoning pack, and cook for 3 minutes, stirring occasionally. Remove from heat carefully. Product is hot. Serve immediately for best results. So they're asking for 2 cups of water to go with this. I'm a little afraid to do 2 cups of water, to be honest, because I never ever do that much water for a ramen. I will put less water, probably around like 1 1/4 cup. Because it makes the flavor a bit better. When you add too much water, it gets a little watery, but since that's their instructions, I will try this. I have 2 packets. If I have to, I will go to my backup packet and make it my way, but I'm going to follow their instructions for now for Twisted Noodles, beef ramen noodles, and I will see you guys back here in a second with the finished product. Well, here are our Twisted beef ramen noodles in my trademark bowl right here. Kind of hard to see. The liquid is right up to the top. It's just kind of formed a layer because I've been letting it cool for a second. But the liquid is all the way up there to the top. And I don't want to spill it. But it looks pretty much like ramen noodles. Does not smell at all like Maruchan or Top Ramen. Again, we're talking about this Twisted Noodles. I let it cool for about, I don't know, 5 or 6 minutes. So I'm hoping it's cool enough to taste. I believe it will be. Still pretty hot, but I think we'll be all right. Noodles get cold fairly quickly once you've separated them from the pack. Once you've isolated the strands for your bite, they cool down relatively quickly. So we'll take a bite like that, try some of the broth, and see where we go. But definitely doesn't smell like Maruchan. It almost smells like stroganoff-y, kind of like hamburger helper-y, which is weird. So let's try it. Boy, this is a really interesting one. Kind of exactly what I was hoping would happen that I didn't think would happen. This has a pretty good taste to it, but it's completely different from Maruchan and Top Ramen. Wildly, wildly different in the beef flavorness. Like the thing about Maruchan and Top Ramen is they're beef flavor technically, but they don't really have a real beef flavor, if that makes sense. They're just kind of a nice savory flavor, but they don't taste of beef, like as in like steak or like actual chunks of beef. They have a generic sort of beefy flavor that layers through it, but it doesn't have a specific kind of strong beef flavor as in like actual chunks of beef, which is what this has. It's very interesting. I really do like the seasoning mix and the broth. Probably better than Maruchan, to be honest, because it's got a strong kind of earthy, beefy, almost like cheese steaky flavor without the cheese, like that kind of beef. It almost has kind of like a fried off, thinly sliced steak kind of flavor, which is very, very, very good and surprising for what is, you know, a cheap ramen packet. Of course, I looked at the ingredients, both them and Maruchan and Top Ramen. They all have MSG in them as one of the first ingredients. The King of Flavor, if you've ever seen Uncle Roger's videos. The King of Flavor, which really does enhance it. It makes it really good, but potentially probably not good for you. But it gives it a very strong beef flavor that kind of reminiscent a little bit of Stroganoff Hamburger Helper. But I think that's because I'm equating it with the actual beef you would add into Stroganoff Hamburger Helper. But it's a strong kind of earthy flavor that I really appreciate. I think it's very different from beef Top Ramen in terms of the soup base, but in a good way. I think I would prefer this, and I think generally most adults would probably prefer this flavor profile over the more generic flavor profile of Maruchan and Top Ramen. There's always a place in my heart for Maruchan and Top Ramen, of course. I'm not going to stop buying them because the nostalgia is there, but I think if you're somebody who's never really had ramen or not really that big into ramen, this is a good way to go, especially if you're broke. This is a nice, it's a really nice thing to add into the rotation, I think. I don't think it's going to take over Maruchan and Top Ramen by any means, but to add it into a rotation of cheap noodles, it's nice. You get a little bit of variety that you generally don't get with cheap processed foods that taste a lot, you know, very similar. This one you get a little bit of variety with. So the beef one I think is solid. The noodles, I'll say this, the noodles I don't like quite as much as Maruchan noodles because the noodles here do have almost a wheaty flavor to them, which they said they are made of wheat. I don't know, I don't think Top Ramen is made of wheat. I think they're bleached. But these have more of a wheat flavor to them, which is not, you know, it's not bad. It's an interesting thing to add in, but I think it does kind of mesh not so well with the soup base, whereas within Maruchan and Top Ramen, you know, you really don't even need the noodles. They're just kind of there as a filler to get flavored by the sauce, whereas these kind of have their own taste almost, which is, you know, a way to go, but it does kind of not mesh as well with the beef flavor as I would like. But I don't really have a problem with it. I just think that it's a little weaker than Maruchan in that front, but it's a lot stronger in the broth front. So they kind of even out. As I said, I think it's a good addition to a lineup. And I would have loved to have these when I was younger. And I was eating so much ramen, I would have definitely added these into the rotation for sure. And again, the price difference is minimal. I don't think anybody's going to pick one over the other over 4 cents. Of course, it is possible, as I said. I've been broke enough to where 4 cents does make a difference, but for most people, it's just going to be a taste difference. And I think this will probably, I think it'll appeal more to older people and older palates, if that makes sense. I think kids will like the Maruchan and Top Ramen more because it's more generic, kind of, and this one has a very specific strong beef flavor, which I enjoy. So I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5, solid. Could be a little better on the noodle front, but I think the soup base is great, and it's a good addition. So I'm going to try the chicken, and they have chicken and shrimp, I think. I'm not sure if they have shrimp. They definitely have a chicken one, which I'll try. I'm not going to review it, though, because I think it's going to be, you know, it's probably be in line with this one, maybe a stronger chicken flavor than Maruchan ramen, which Maruchan chicken ramen doesn't really taste like chicken. It has its own flavor, so I'll be very curious to try that out, but I think these are a solid addition, and for being cheaper and I guess made in the USA, if that's a positive for you, it's a good pickup. So Twisted Noodles, 4 out of 5. Check them out if you're broke or if you want to just have some ramen for nostalgia's sake. I think they're great, and I will see you all next time. Okay, if anybody stuck around, this is going to be my quick explanation of how I usually make my ramen, because I think this will benefit from my technique of making ramen, which sounded complicated in my head for some reason, even though it's very simple. So I'm going to try to explain it simply enough that you can follow without saying too many words, because I'm overthinking it. But essentially, in these instructions, they want you to boil the water first, a predetermined amount of water, boil it, then add the noodles and cook it. I don't do that. What I like to do is, first of all, I won't use 2 cups. I'll use between 1 1/4 and 1 1/2 cups. I eyeball it, but I was trying to do it with the measuring cup to see what it was like. Generally around, I'd say, 1 1/2 cups of water is about the right amount. What you want to achieve when in your saucepan is that the noodles are mostly covered with water, but not fully submerged. So about 1 1/2 cups of water, put it in your saucepan. Okay, that's step number 1. Step number 2, open the ramen and put the noodles right in the water cold before you even turn it on. Open the packet and sprinkle it over the top so you hit the dry noodles and the water. You want to kind of half and half it. Half of the seasoning on the top of the dry noodles and half in the water. So the dry noodles won't, the seasoning on top of the noodles won't get integrated into the broth right away. Turn the heat on, cook it, you know, let it get to a boil. Once it starts getting up to a boil, and that you check the noodles with tongs or whatever you want to do, I use tongs. Check the noodles, and once they're soft enough on the bottom, you can flip the brick over, essentially, and put the seasoned side down into the water, and then you let that cook on a boil for maybe 1 to 1 1/2 minutes until whatever, you know, tenderness you want the noodles. I tend to make them a little more al dente, and then that's it. You're done. You turn it off and put it in the thing. The end effect of this is that the broth flavor will be a lot stronger than it is in this way, and it's mostly because of the water amount. With 1 1/2 cups of water and bringing it to a boil, you will lose some water in the boil, and it's also just less water in general, so the flavor of the broth will be stronger. The end result you want is just a little bit of broth. You know, at the end, you only want maybe this much broth in your bowl, and you don't want it to cover all the noodles. You want some of the top noodles to not be in the broth at the end. That's essentially the technique. Hopefully that wasn't that confusing. That's a little bonus for anybody stuck around. And now for reals, I will see you all next time.